Hi guys, welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things books. My name is Chloe if you're new here, and it is great to have you. So I want to talk about a little bit of a spicy topic, possibly a bit of a controversial one, and that's whether or not we feel that Booktok is ruining the reading experience. And I think this comes at quite an interesting time with the TikTok ban fast approaching, which by the way wasn't planned, it was purely coincidental. I didn't realise that this video would be going up on the day that TikTok was banned, but we're just going to move past that. Anyway, I also want to preface this video by saying that this is my opinion. It's okay if you disagree with my opinion. By all means, sound off in the comments below. You can disagree and we can have a discussion, but that is exactly what this video is. It's a discussion, not a witch hunt. We can disagree with each other while still being respectful to one another. So keep it friendly. With all of that being said, go grab your favourite drink and let's get into it. So I want to start off by talking about the good stuff, because social media has undeniably made reading cool again. Platforms like TikTok and Instagram have introduced thousands, if not millions, of people to books that they would never normally pick up. And I think that's great. As someone who has always been a voracious reader and was made fun of quite heavily for that when I was a child, I think it's great that other people are now enjoying the hobby that I have always had. And it's great being able to talk to new people about books that I love. As of the time that I'm filming this, the hashtag Booktok has over 44 million posts. And although TikTok have stopped showing view counts for hashtags, back in September 2023, this hashtag had over 200 billion views. Just let that sink in for a minute and then consider the fact that we're now 18 months further forward. That's crazy. But here's the catch. Do we think that with so much hype, reviews are becoming less honest? And are we chasing trends rather than genuinely good stories? If you just think about it for a minute, when everybody's raving about a book, it's very hard to criticise it. You don't want to be the odd one out, and people often face a lot of backlash for having differing opinions. Raise your hand if you've ever been pressured to love a book because it was trending. Same. A lot of the time you're vilified for disliking a book by its fandom, and it feels like people aren't allowed to have a different opinion anymore without being attacked for it. Now, I think that hype can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it boosts lesser known authors and it diversifies what's being read, which I think is amazing, and I think we need more of that. But on the other hand, it creates this weird pressure to jump on the bandwagon, and sometimes it feels like we're reading for clout rather than for enjoyment. If you take a step back and think about your favourite book for a minute that was recommended to you on TikTok, do you think that if you stripped back all of that social media buzz and the influencer reviews, you would have still bought the book? Would you still enjoy it as much? Possibly not. And let's be honest, the over-glamorization of certain books can lead to oversaturation and disappointment. How many times have you picked up a book that had thousands of 5-star reviews on Goodreads or TikTok, it feels, and just thought, meh, it's okay. And you read the comments and it says, ARC sent for honest review. I also think that this trend chasing or social media hype train is having an impact on the quality of the books themselves. For me, I feel like the quality of writing has really taken a dip as authors are trying to push out a book that fits a certain trend before we all move on from it, or they're trying to ride this hype wave. I think a great example of this is Iron Flame. I absolutely loved and devoured Fourth Wing, but poor Rebecca Yarros, because of all of the hype that Fourth Wing got, was pushed to release the second installment in that series in the same year. And for me, personally, I think the story really suffered for that. It was not as well written as the first installment. And when you compare it to that very high bar that Fourth Wing set, it fell completely flat. It was not the same caliber book, in my opinion. I still enjoyed it, I still think it was good, but I think it could have been a lot better had the publishing team not been trying to follow that hype wave that she was on at the time. And it doesn't just affect authors, as readers as well. Another very noticeable side effect of this whole Booktok sphere is just the sheer pressure to read as much as humanly possible. Sometimes it feels like if you're not reading 50, 100, 200 plus books per year, you're somehow less of a reader. I mean, I remember that girl who I won't share because she turned her shares off, so for the sake of respecting that for her, I won't put the profile up. But there was a girl on Booktok that claimed that she read 1,000 books in a year. I don't necessarily believe that to be true, but just look at the pressure that that puts on other people. If you're someone who has only read, I say only, but if you're someone, it's still, it doesn't matter how many books in a year you read, you're still a reader. But if you only read 10 books in a year and you are then watching videos of people who read 300 books, 500 books, 1,000 books, that makes you feel really bad about yourself, and it makes you feel like a bit of a failure as a reader. And I definitely think that this is something that I fell victim to in 2024. I keep telling you all that I'm coming out of this reading slump, and I keep using the term I only read 14 books in 2024. But actually, if you take a step back and think about that, that's still above average. Back in 2019, there was a study that was released that said the average American reads 12 books a year, and about 34% of Brits read 10 or more books in a year. So if we take those 14 books that I read last year, that is above average in both countries. So why are we downplaying that effort, that achievement? Why are we comparing ourselves to these people who read so many books in a year? And listen, that's absolutely fine. If you're a fast reader and you get through loads of those books, more power to you, that's great. But I also think that the rest of us mere mortals really need to take a step back and realise that that's not necessarily the norm, and it's okay if you don't do that. To the best of my knowledge, I think this all started with the Goodreads goal, and then as we got the rise of Booktok, it really morphed into this untamable beast that it seems to have become today. And it's not just about reading books for enjoyment anymore, it's about keeping up. Keeping up with the latest releases or the Booktok recommendations and the never-ending stream of must-reads. And honestly, it's a bit exhausting. We all need to remember that reading should be fun. It's a hobby that we use to escape the very mundane reality that most of us live. Let's be real. So it's not that deep. And if you're part of this Booktok community and you are overwhelmed by the pace of the reading community, it's okay to take a step back and remember that quality matters so much more than quantity. It is absolutely okay to only read one book that you love and adore than rushing through 10 books just to hit a goal. Now, I want to sidestep a little bit into a slightly different topic, and before I do, I think this might get me shot down in flames a little bit, but it's fine. I just want to say that I don't care in the slightest what you choose to read. If you want to read romance, fantasy, erotica, autobiographies, I don't care. It makes absolutely no difference to my life whatsoever. And you shouldn't care what other people spend their time reading either. Like I said a minute ago, it's a hobby and it's not that deep. But I do want to talk briefly about genre blending. Specifically, the rise of romance in genres like fantasy or sci-fi or mystery, etc., etc. It feels like no matter what you pick up these days, there's a romantic subplot, often a spicy one, because let's be real, sex sells. It always has. Now, I'm not saying that romance doesn't belong in these other genres. Absolutely not. I think when it's done well, it can really add emotional depth to a story. But lately, it feels more like romance is overshadowing the main plot. I seem to be reading a lot more fantasy books where the world building has taken a back seat to a love triangle. And in fact, it's taken over so much in the last few years that we now have a whole new genre in this romantasy sphere, which, don't get me wrong, I love and enjoy. Some of my favourite books are romantasy books, but often, especially more lately, it feels like the plot is just an afterthought. If you look at some books like, say, The Night Circus or The Priory of the Orange Tree as examples, I think these books weave romance very subtly and beautifully without letting it dominate. On the flip side, you have books like The Hurricane Wars that, in my opinion, was marketed as an epic fantasy adventure book and really should have been that, but it got consumed by really a romance that for me should have just been a subplot, and it completely overshadowed everything else in the book from about that halfway point onwards. It was pretty much just a romance novel at that point, which is such a shame because that book had amazing potential to be a great fantasy saga. I don't think that this trend is limited to fantasy though. I do think that sci-fi and mystery are feeling that romance take over as well. I think publishers think that every book needs a love story to sell, and I don't know if I'm being a little bit cynical or if that is the case, but I just feel like there's a major over-romancification in literature just now, and it's okay to not have a love interest or 3+ sometimes, and it's okay to have platonic side characters. Not everything needs to be a bodice ripper. Speaking of romance, can we talk about how actual romance novels are getting smuttier and smuttier? Don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with spice. I love a bit of spice in my books, it's fine. And like I said earlier, if that's what you enjoy reading, more power to you. But it feels like the bar just keeps getting raised, and not always in a good way. I mean, there's some people in the comments of videos asking if classic novels have spice in them. And I feel like I've walked into a bit of a Wattpad fever dream. Like, it's crazy. Does it have spice? No, Brittany, this is Dr. Seuss. Guys, calm down. We're even at the point where we've got people fucking doorknobs, for Christ's sake. It needs to stop, please. And then there's also this rise of trigger warnings as well, which I feel are becoming a bit of a marketing tool. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems to me that the more trigger warnings a book has, the more it sells. It's like publishers are leaning into this trend hard. It's almost like they're saying the more shocking and outrageous the content is, the better. And the scary thing about that is that the themes within these novels that are being romanticised to young girls especially are not okay. We are teaching women that it's okay to be in an abusive relationship as long as he's 6'5" with dark hair and grey eyes and he apologises after he locks you up in his basement. No, that's not okay. I mean, it's just utter nonsense. Some of it, and I think especially with these, with the mafia romance and the werewolf romances, you know, where you've got that dominant alpha male, I think it's very prevalent in those spheres as well. And I think sometimes those themes are taken way too far. I think readers absolutely should get a heads up about sensitive content or topics, but when those themes become part of the marketing machine and are applauded or celebrated, it's starting to feel a bit icky. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there because I feel like I'm starting to get a little bit preachy now. But I do think that there are a lot of issues in the reading community that we need to discuss. And I would genuinely like to hear your perspective of it. Do you think that social media is having a negative impact on our reading experience? I think this is such a nuanced topic and there are no right or wrong answers. So please, by all means, sound off in the comments, but be nice. If you want to see more bookish content from me, guys, then please like and subscribe this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.